If you've met someone who needed to win every single conversation, who couldn't just let a compliment sit without immediately fishing for another one. If someone seemed completely unbothered by criticism right up until one small, offhand comment sent them into a reaction nobody saw coming. If a friendship felt electric for the first few months and then somehow got harder to be around the better you knew them. Welcome. None of that means what narcissist gets used to mean in everyday conversation. Or maybe you know someone like this. The coworker who takes credit the second something goes well and finds someone else to blame the moment it doesn't. The friend who lit up every room at first and slowly started feeling exhausting to keep up with. The person who seems totally fine being disagreed with, but goes quiet and cold the moment they feel ignored instead. Here's the first thing worth getting right, because it flips the common assumption almost completely. The popular idea is that narcissism means loving yourself too much. Research paints something closer to the opposite. A lot of narcissistic people spend enormous mental energy on a running internal audit. How did that land? Did they notice me? Am I still respected? Am I losing ground? That's not simple self-love. That's near constant self-evaluation. And it's exhausting work most people never see happening underneath the confidence. That distinction matters because narcissism and healthy self-esteem aren't cousins. They're actually built differently. Healthy self-esteem sounds like I have value, something that mostly holds steady on its own. Narcissism sounds closer to I need you to recognize my value, something that depends almost entirely on someone else supplying it. One runs on an internal battery, the other has to stay plugged in. It's also worth saying clearly that this isn't one single personality wearing one single mask. Psychologists distinguish between grandiose narcissism, the confident, bold, attention-commanding version most people picture, and vulnerable narcissism, which looks almost like the opposite, defensive, anxious, easily wounded by the smallest perceived slight. Both are built around intense self-focus. They just wear completely different weather on the outside. A few everyday patterns tend to follow directly from that internal audit running non-stop in the background. Success gets claimed quickly, credit taken almost automatically, while failure tends to get handed off to something or someone else. A pattern researchers call the self-serving bias, present in most people to some degree, but usually sharper here. There's also a quieter thread underneath it, a genuine sense that ordinary rules were built for other people, not for them. Less arrogance in the cartoonish sense, and more a real, felt belief that they're the exception the rule never quite accounted for. And when there's a choice between a private win nobody sees and a slightly smaller one that gets noticed publicly, the visible option usually wins. Because an accomplishment that nobody witnesses barely registers as one at all. Here's the uncomfortable part, and it's a strange one. You'd expect direct disagreement to sting the most. Research suggests something else does more damage: being ignored. Being excluded or overlooked appears to threaten a narcissistic self-image even more sharply than being openly challenged does. Disagreement at least means someone's paying attention. Being unseen offers nothing to work with at all. No argument to win, no audience to perform for, just silence, which turns out to be far harder for a fragile self-image to metabolize than conflict ever was. So why would a personality be built this way in the first place? The psychoanalyst Heinz Kohut proposed something that reframed the whole idea decades ago. He suggested a lot of narcissistic behavior doesn't come from too much self-love at all. It comes from early disruptions in emotional development that left someone without a stable, secure sense of self to fall back on. So they built an image instead, one that has to be actively maintained because there was never a steady foundation underneath it holding the image up on its own. There's an old story that captures this better than most modern explanations manage to. Narcissus, in the myth, didn't actually fall in love with himself. He fell in love with a reflection, an image on the surface of water, not the person underneath it. A lot of psychologists think that distinction is the whole point, and it still holds up remarkably well. The obsession was never with the real self, it was with keeping the image intact. Now here's the part almost nobody catches, and it explains something confusing that a lot of people run into directly. Self-report surveys often find narcissistic individuals rating themselves as reasonably empathetic, genuinely believing it, not performing it. Actual behavioral tests frequently tell a very different story. The gap between what someone believes about their own empathy and what they actually demonstrate in the moment can be significant, and it isn't necessarily dishonesty. It's more that the internal audit running constantly in the background, how am I coming across, am I still respected, tends to crowd out the quieter attention that real empathy for someone else actually requires. The cost of all this shows up most clearly over time, rather than at first. Narcissistic individuals often make excellent first impressions. Confident, charming, socially sharp in the opening weeks of a relationship. That impression tends to soften the longer people stick around. Once the pattern becomes visible, admiration standing in for respect, disagreements landing as attacks on identity rather than differences of opinion. There's a real distinction hiding in that word swap. Respect assumes two people standing on roughly equal ground. Admiration assumes a bit of a hierarchy, someone looking up. A relationship quietly built on the second one tends to feel unstable in a way that's hard to name until it's already worn someone down. The same dynamic shows up in group settings too. Narcissistic individuals often emerge as leaders quickly in unstructured situations, projecting exactly the confidence and decisiveness a leaderless room is hungry for. Whether that leadership actually holds up depends heavily on what happens afterward: accountability, follow through, how criticism gets received once the initial shine wears off. Getting picked first and staying good at it turn out to be two very different skills. Admiration itself has a short shelf life too, providing only temporary satisfaction before it becomes the new baseline, and more is required just to feel the same as before. That hunger for something fresh is part of why some narcissistic individuals end up chasing new audiences over maintaining older relationships, since novel admiration simply hits harder than familiar admiration ever manages to again. It's worth ending on the caution this topic actually deserves. Most people rate themselves as an above-average driver, an above-average friend, an above-average leader, which is obviously not statistically possible for the majority of any group. That's normal self-enhancement, something almost everyone does in small doses, and it isn't a diagnosis. Some self-focus, some confidence, some healthy ambition is a completely ordinary and even useful part of being a person. Narcissism, as a real pattern, isn't the presence of any of that. It's a specific, rigid dependence on it. A self-image that needs constant outside reinforcement just to keep standing. Less like owning a steady fortress. More like rebuilding one, over and over, every single day, because it was never quite finished the first time. Subscribe and watch this video next.